this all comes back to the point I want to pivot into, getting into the boxing, okay? Now, Ryan Garcia, Gervonta Davis, David Benavidez, Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, Bam Rodriguez. These are all young, talented fighters that have gotten a lot of hype for one reason or the other. But now, I have a new thing, a new concept that I'm gonna start implementing here on True School Sports, and I'm gonna I heard this from when Cali X Boxing and D Style were talking about it. So I'm not gonna take credit for this concept. They talked about it on a live, and I heard them loud and clear, and I want to make this into a concept. We're going to go by a thing now called the Jermaine Taylor standard, right? The Jermaine Taylor standard. We're going to go by a thing called the Jermaine Taylor standard because a lot of these fighters, quite frankly, are not anything close to what Jermaine Taylor was at their age. Now, what do you mean, BT? What are you talking about? Well, Jermaine Taylor, although his career didn't have the most longevity and he fizzled out pretty quickly, Jermaine Taylor did more in a shorter period of time than these guys have done in 7-8 years as pros. So I kind of wanted to talk about that and then get into Ryan Garcia versus Tank. But we look at Jermaine Taylor, right? He was born in 1978, so he was 33-4-1, 20 KOs. Guy was a phenomenal fighter. Now, the pinnacle of Jermaine Taylor's career clearly came when he beat Bernard Hopkins on that fateful night of July 16, 2005 to become the undisputed middleweight champion of the world. And when he did that, he was 24 years old. Now, this is 2005. This is July 2005. He turned pro in, January of 2001. So we're talking about 4 years of pro, and he had 23 pro fights. Now, you got guys like now, right? So if we use that standard, if we use the Jermaine Taylor standard, you'd be surprised how many of these fighters that these YouTube content creators argue and fuss over fall so short of that standard. And with that being said, I'm going to use this. Any fighter under 25 or 25 or lower who's getting any sort of hype, even if you're 27, if you're like a Tank and they're still calling you young, we're going to use the Jermaine Taylor standard and we're going to see. And it's not to put these guys down. Don't get it twisted. It's not to put these guys down. It's to really measure how great these guys really are. How many guys can actually come close to or meet the standard of doing of what a Jermaine Taylor did in 2005 when he beat a fighter as good as Bernard Hopkins, when he became undisputed at 24 years old, when he did it in 23, 24 pro fights, when he was only 4 years professional. How many fighters can actually live up to that standard? Let's do a quick check under the hood, okay? So remember what I told you. Jermaine Taylor was 4 years a pro. He was 23 fights into his career when he fought Bernard Hopkins, and he was only 24 years old. So remember all those numbers, and let's apply it to some of the guys that get the most hype in boxing. So we look at Gervonta Davis, a hell of a fighter, explosive fighter, one of the biggest draws in boxing right now today, okay? He's 27 years old. Baltimore's very own. He's Baltimore's very own. And Gervonta Davis has been in what I call the witness protection program for a long time. I used to have a video series on this channel called the Gervonta Davis Witness Protection Program. Okay? And truth be told, he's still in it. He's still, as much as I like Tank, and I love Tank, I've seen him fight. I've flown to Texas to watch him fight. I was in the crowd when he fought Leo Santa Cruz that fateful night in San Antonio at the Alamo Dome when he knocked him out. I like Tank. I cheer for him at a couple of his fights. I do have a liking for him. But the reality is, if we use the Jermaine Taylor standard and we apply it to Gervonta Davis, first and foremost, he's older than Jermaine Taylor by 3 years, okay? And I understand everybody's path to greatness is different. So just because you fall short of the Jermaine Taylor standard doesn't mean your career won't wind up being better than Jermaine Taylor. It should be better than Jermaine Taylor because Jermaine Taylor fizzed out quite fast. But we're only using this for guys that they call young. And some people still call Tank young, but he's not. He's got more fights than Jermaine Taylor had 4 years into his pro career. He has not fought anywhere close. I mean, you guys tell me who on his resume, all right? And and it's not like he can't get the fights. This isn't like a situation where he's a guy that's high risk, low reward, and can't get fights. He can get the fights. They just don't want to. Mayweather Promotions, Floyd Mayweather doesn't want to give him the fights. So you tell me one of his resume. Was it Fonseca? Was it Liam Walsh? Was it Pedraza? I mean, Pedraza, the Pedraza one has aged very well, and people like to gas that one up, but that was 5 years ago, guys. Gervonta Davis is not up to par when it comes to, just like where he should be in his career. And a lot of that I think is down to maybe other promotions having him in a witness protection program. Now, a lot of people are of the mindset that he might fight Ryan Garcia next. I think it should happen next. Like any rational person in the world, that fight should happen next. There should be no roadblocks, because truth be told, there really is no such thing as roadblocks in boxing. Like Cali X said, we've been conditioned, and I'm going to raise my hand and even say myself, we've been conditioned, I've been conditioned, you've been conditioned, we've all been conditioned to talk like promoters, to talk like managers, to say that, this guy deserves this split, this guy deserves that split. We're talking as if we're in the negotiating room, and the reality is neither you're seeing any of that money, neither am I seeing any of that money. Our responsibility as boxing fans, as boxing content creators, is only about the betterment of the sport. Yes, we want the fighters to get paid, because it's not cool to see guys like I know fighters. Like I'm talking as a guy. I mean, I know Riddick Bowe. I know Evander Holyfield. I mean, these guys, I see them on South Florida every now and then, and I used to see them a lot back in the day when they used to be at the Heavyweight Factory. So I've been subjected to seeing guys who were once at the top of the world have everything financially, and then all of a sudden now they don't have anything to their name. So I do think fighters should get paid, but I don't think it should come at the expense of screwing over the boxing fans. And I really feel like that's what's happened with Gervonta Davis, Mayweather Promotions, and the whole witness protection program they got involved. So he falls very short of that Jermaine Taylor standard. Extremely short. Probably shorter than most guys that I'm going to start going through. You know what I'm saying? So it's no knock on him, but he is not meeting the standards. Now, if you got a comment, I'm going to get your comments in a second after I get through Ryan Garcia, because you guys need to understand this. A lot of these guys that these content creators cap for, like Gervonta Davis, Ryan Garcia, Dave Benavidez, even some guys that I like if I'm being objective, even some guys that I like, even the Jaron Ennis's and the Shakur Stevens of the world, these guys are not at that level yet, and they're older than guys like Jermaine Taylor. And mind you, I'm saying this to make a point. It's not to put these guys down. It's more so the fact that we need to raise the standards in boxing. Back then, and back then wasn't even long ago, but back then, standards used to be higher. Fighters were held to a certain standard, and now you get fighters like a Tank who fight nothing but in-house fights and don't really win any legitimate titles in most of these weight classes they're fighting in, and people glorify them. And I don't get it. And I think it's very bad for the sport. I really feel like the fighters and the promoters who get the benefits of this praise of fans who don't know what they're talking about, they continue to really just like put the sport at a disadvantage. You know what I'm saying? Now look, Ryan Garcia right now, as it stands, he's 23 years old. His birthday will be in August, next month, August 8th. So happy early birthday to Ryan Garcia. His birthday's coming up. He's going to be 24, which was the same age Jermaine Taylor was. Now, if we go and apply the Jermaine Taylor standard to Ryan, there's still some leeway for Ryan because he's a bit younger than a Jermaine Taylor. But the reality is he's not going to reach that level right now. And he's falling well short of that. So he still has lots to prove. He's 23-0. That was Jermaine Taylor's record going into the Bernard Hopkins fight, who on his resume is at the level of a Bernard Hopkins. Has he won undisputed? Has he even unified titles? Has he even won a world title? Has he sniffed a world title? The unfortunate reality is that for all the Instagram followers, for all the endorsement deals, for all of the great attributes that Ryan Garcia does have and the potential that he still does have to become one of boxing's biggest stars, if not boxing's biggest star, he has not realized much of anything yet. The pinnacle of his career is beating Luke Campbell. And again, this is not to throw salt on Ryan. This is only to challenge Ryan and Tank to do better. Because you guys, I just see too much of it on YouTube. I see some channels that want to dick ride Ryan Garcia. I see some channels that want to dick ride Gervonta Davis. Some channels that want to dick ride Dave Benavidez. And we're going to hold fighters to higher standards here on True School Sports. I'm raising my hand. I'm going to be better. And we all got to be better. So that's what it is. And listen, We're going to continue applying the Jermaine Taylor standard to all these guys because it needs to be applied. We need a framework. You know what I'm saying? We need a framework. We need a standard to go off of because it's not going. It's not right now with the way boxing is. It's not cutting it right now, right? It is not cutting it. Okay. Shout out to my man Marcel Sauto, bro. Bud Spence is done for November in Vegas. You heard it here first. I'm in Houston and I'm telling you the truth. Cool. If it happens, great for the sport. I hope both guys can make the fight happen for the both their fan bases that cap for them on the daily, and they can let the welterweight division move forward, you know, and give a lot of boxing fans the fight they want to see. Personally, look, if they don't fight, I'm not bothered. If they do fight, then good, you know, why not? You know, I know a lot of people are going crazy because Showtime put out a video where basically they interviewed Bud at the Hall of Fame weekend. So good. If it happens, good. If it doesn't, I'm not bothered either way. But I would hope for the sake of boxing and for the sake of many boxing fans, this fight gets done. Because if it doesn't get done, a lot of people are going to be disgruntled. And I do think this would be a situation where people actually wind up leaving the sport. You know what I'm saying? So. Hey, Susem, what's good, champ? Good to see you. Cali X says Jermaine Taylor became undisputed champion 4 years into his career, only fighter to become undisputed champion by beating undisputed champion, I believe. Amazing accomplishment. He was the underdog too. He was the underdog, and not even just that. Even if you took away, like, let's just say you want to take away Jermaine Taylor's professional accomplishments. Let's say you don't really care that he went undisputed. Okay, let's chuck that in the bin. A lot of these fighters, particularly the ones here in America that, you know, were tabbed to do big things in the Olympics, whether it be Devin Haney, who didn't go to the Olympics, whether it be Shakur Stevenson, who was the gold medal favorite, whether it be Keyshawn Davis, who lost to Andy Cruz again in the Olympics, whether it be any of these guys, Andrade, anybody who's been on Team USA. Taylor did better than most of them as an amateur as well as a pro. He was a bronze medalist in the Olympics, so keep that in mind as well, right? Keep that in mind. And he was the underdog in both fights. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just really calling a spade because someone's got to do it in boxing. Someone's got to do it in boxing because if people like myself and Cali X and the rational people in boxing don't do it, who's gonna do it? Who's gonna do it? Shout out to my man Chance Dotson. You guys know the drill. When the super chats come out, so does Don King. So Don King, go ahead and talk.
Hey everybody, let's have some fun. You don't live but once, and when you're dead, you're done. So let the good times roll. It don't matter whether you're young or old. Let the good times roll.
Let the good times roll. We will here on True School Sports. Shout out to my main man, 50 grand, Chance Dawson with the $2 super chat. He says, "Bro, it's good to see you back on the live stream. It's good to be back. It's good to be back. You know, I've had a tough month. You know, I had my as I've said many times in videos, I had my boy Gabriel Chacon, the first person I ever trained with and sparred with at Canito's Boxing Gym. He had a very short pro career. Didn't really get to reap the benefits of most of it, but he was a guy that really showed me what boxing was all about, and he's one of the guys that made me love boxing the way I do. So I've been grieving his death a little bit this month. I'm getting back into the swing of things, but it's good to be back, man. You know, at some point in time, you know, trains and buses don't stop for anybody, so the show must go on. So yeah, it's good to be back, man. I'm glad that you're happy I'm back. But yeah, man. Low Blow Champ says Floyd is scared to play his card. They didn't let him fight Farmer or Russell, and those were the easy fights to make. There were easy fights to make, and you would have favored taking those fights. You would have favored him in those fights. He would have been unified champion. It would have elevated his status at that time, and you know, but you know we can't do that. We can't do that. He had to fight the Fonsecas of the world and guys like that. So I'm just getting to a point where, you know, the reality is very few fighters in boxing, and I'm not trying to sound like a dick or downplay fighters because these guys put in a lot of work. They accomplish more than I ever will. I didn't box professionally or anything like that, so I respect them. These guys are all talented. They're all great in their own right. Don't take it as, hey, I want the sport to be better off, and I just feel like there's a lot of things wrong in the sport we need to correct and fix. You know, so we got standards here on True School Sports. Now, getting back to screen share, right? If we look at David Bennett, a guy that, you know, I'll be honest with you guys, and I'm going to do a video about this soon. I think there's some things with his career that have been understated. there's reasons why he hasn't been able to get the fights that that people want to see him in, and I think it's a reason that most people haven't considered. So I got a video coming out on that soon. So I'm not gonna say too much negative about Benavidez here, but the reality is he's been beating up on these 68 pounders and 54 pounders, and smaller guys than him. And right now he's 25 years old, older than Jermaine Taylor was, with 3 more fights. And he, where's his Bernard Hopkins? Where's his signature fight? Where's his unification fight? He doesn't have that fight, okay? Doesn't mean he won't have a better career. It just means that all this hype you guys give guys like David Benavidez and Tank and Ryan, I mean, it has to stop. You guys got to start really looking at these things without your feelings. I like Shakur Stevenson, and we'll go to Shakur right now. I like Shakur Stevenson. I've been a Shakur Stevenson fan longer than most of you guys have known who he is. I interviewed Shakur Stevenson before he was an Olympian, before he went to the Olympics. Okay, he's 25. All right, he's 25. He's got less fights than Jermaine Taylor, but he's been pro around the same amount of time, if not a little bit longer. And his signature win is a good win. I give it to him. Oscar Valdez is a good win, but it still leaving a little bit to be desired. I think his career will progress in a nice fashion, and he will ultimately wind up probably having a better career than Jermaine Taylor. But even him, if we apply the Jermaine Taylor young fighter standard to him, he doesn't quite meet the mark despite how good he is, okay? All right, so even guys I like. Even the guys I like. The only two fighters in boxing right now, guys. The only two fighters in boxing. The only two fighters in boxing right now that are on their way to making the grade or have already made the grade as younger fighters, and I'll even say 3 fighters really, are we'll start with Bam Rodriguez. Bam Rodriguez is 22 years old. All right, he was born in 2000, so he's the youngest guy of this crowd I'm going to talk about. He has 8 less fights than Jermaine had. He's 3 years younger, and he's been a pro around the same amount of time, but still younger, so there's a little bit more leeway for a guy like that. And when you factor in that in his last 2 fights, he's beaten Carlos Cuadras and Rungvisai back-to-back, 2 of the premier names in his division, and now he's fighting Israel Gonzalez, a guy that's not on the level of Rungvisai or Cuadras, but a guy that has challenged for world titles, in my opinion. And for those of you who are really up on your super flyweight boxing, this is a guy that I recognize as the uncrowned WBA champion, because he really beat Callier 5 when they fought in 2018. They should have given it to him, but they didn't. He got robbed in Monaco. So even his tune-up fights, even Bam's tune-up fights are better than a lot of these guys' title defenses, okay? That's just the reality of it. I think Bam's on his way with the guys he has in his division to not just meeting the Jermaine Taylor standard, but becoming the best of the bunch. Because he's giving the fans what they want to see. He's giving them what they want to see. He's challenging himself. He's fighting top guys in his weight class. And then last but certainly not least, this is a guy that I've criticized in the past. Now, mind you, he has 5 more fights than Jermaine Taylor had when he became undisputed, but he's 2 years younger, and he's been pro 2 years longer than Jermaine Taylor. So it's a bit tricky because he turned pro so young, but guess what? The fact that he became undisputed a year younger than Jermaine Taylor, you give a guy like Devin Haney credit. Devin Haney, listen, I've criticized him in the past, sometimes rightfully so, sometimes not rightfully so, but Devin Haney has earned his stripes. One thing you can say about Devin Haney is that if there's a young fighter in boxing who's been earning his stripes, it's been this young man right here, Devin Haney. He's fought on all the platforms. It didn't matter if it was Showtime when he was a prospect. It didn't matter if it was The Zone when he was a contender. And it didn't matter if it's now ESPN as the now undisputed champion. He's probably the only young fighter that's fought on all the platforms. He's the only young fighter that's really went out of his way to show the world that he means what he says and he is who they say he is. How many fighters in boxing would sign a deal where you would have to fight a guy in his hometown, and if you beat him for all the belts, still have to give him a rematch? He did that. Now, I don't know if the rematch is going to happen. They might work out a deal to where the rematch don't got to happen, but he signed that contract and he dared to be great. So you give a guy like this credit. He is not just meeting the Jermaine Taylor standard. He is probably the only young fighter in boxing that is exceeding the Jermaine Taylor young fighter standard. So for that, Devin Haney must have respect, adoration, and just and flowers put on his name. So that's the framework. That's the standard we're going to go by here on True School Sports. The Jermaine Taylor young fighter standard. Because there's too many networks pushing propaganda, brainwashing well-intentioned boxing fans into believing, lies and foolishness and stupidity. And that shouldn't be the case. So someone has to be the voice of reason here in boxing. And it's going to be people like myself that are the voice of reason.